Logan Carter woke up early that morning, as he always did. The sun was just beginning to rise over the gentle hills that framed his farm, casting a warm golden glow across the fields of wheat that rippled in the breeze like an ocean of gold. He stepped out onto his front porch, a steaming mug of black coffee in hand, and took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. It was peaceful here, always had been, and Logan liked it that way. But something was off. As he glanced out over the landscape, Logan's brow furrowed. Right there, smack in the middle of his property, parked as brazenly as if it belonged there, was a gleaming, jet-black SUV. Its chrome accents flashed in the morning sun, and the vehicle stuck out against the earth and grass like a diamond in a cow pasture. Logan set his mug down carefully on the porch railing, his frown deepening. That wasn't one of his trucks. His workers wouldn't be careless enough to leave a vehicle blocking access to the eastern barn, the very barn where he needed to drive his tractor later that morning. He stared at the SUV for another long moment, then slowly descended the porch steps, boots crunching over the gravel as he headed toward the intruder. Maybe someone got lost. It wasn't uncommon for city folks to take a wrong turn and end up on private land around these parts. The GPS didn't always recognize the difference between a dirt road and someone's driveway. Logan had helped his fair share of lost tourists get turned around, but this didn't feel like that. He approached the SUV cautiously, peering through its darkly tinted windows. Empty. The engine was cold. It had been parked there for a while, but the dust on the tires hadn't settled yet. He walked around it, looking for a note, a phone number, some explanation. Nothing. Logan ran a calloused hand over his jaw, his fingers rasping against a few days' worth of stubble. He wasn't the sort to jump to conclusions. Whoever left this thing here was probably off somewhere looking for help. Maybe they'd be back in a minute. So he waited and waited. By midday, Logan's patience had worn thin. He had chores to finish, equipment to prep, and that SUV was still sitting there, an unmoving monument to entitlement in the middle of his field. Every time he passed it, his irritation grew. It wasn't just an inconvenience now. It was a message. One that said, "We don't care about you or your land." Logan took out his phone and snapped a picture of the vehicle. Enough was enough. It was time for answers. He drove into town later that afternoon, stopping first at Jasper's Feedva Supply, where he always got his grain. If anyone knew anything about this mystery vehicle, it'd be the folks who spent their lives in this town. As he was loading a sack of feed into the back of his truck, he asked casually, "Any of y'all know who drives a black Cadillac Escalade with Nevada plates?" Jasper himself, who'd been running the shop since Logan was in grade school, gave a dry chuckle. "Bet you it's one of them HOA suits from up in Pine Ridge Estates." Logan raised an eyebrow. "HOA? What HOA?" Jasper wiped his hands on his apron. "New development out by Willow Creek. They call it Pine Ridge Estates. Fancy little place, HOA and all. Word is, they've been trying to push their rules on folks who ain't even part of it." Logan didn't like the sound of that. "You're telling me they're trying to boss people around outside their own neighborhood?" "Yep," Jasper said. "Heard they've been sending letters to folks about what color they can paint their barns and where they can park their trucks. Nonsense, if you ask me." Logan thanked him and made a few more stops around town. The story was the same wherever he went. Pine Ridge HOA had been getting bold, too bold. By the time Logan got a name, he was already seething. Melissa Hawthorne, president of Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. A woman who, by all accounts, made Attila the Hun look like a kindergarten teacher. It didn't take long to track her down. She was sitting at a cafe on the new side of town, sipping iced tea with two other women who looked like they thought they ran the world. Logan walked straight up to their table and planted himself firmly in front of them. "Melissa Hawthorne?" She glanced up, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow raised. "Yes." He held up his phone and showed her the picture of the SUV. "That your car?" She barely glanced at the screen before giving a dismissive sniff. "That's my assistant's vehicle. He parked it there this morning." Logan stared at her. "On my land." She waved her hand as if swatting away a fly. "We assumed no one would mind. It's just a farm after all." Logan felt his teeth clench. "Move it. Now." Melissa sipped her drink, unfazed. "I'll have someone get to it eventually. Just work around it for now. Logan's jaw tightened. He gave her one slow nod. All right. And he walked away. Melissa had no idea what she'd just started. The next morning, Logan stepped out onto his porch, expecting to see that Escalade gone. Instead, there were two of them, both parked with deliberate arrogance in the exact spot he needed clear. That was it. Logan stomped inside, grabbed his phone, and called the number listed on Pine Ridge Estates' HOA website. Melissa answered on the second ring. Pine Ridge HOA. Melissa speaking. It's Logan Carter, he growled. Move your vehicles. Now. Melissa sighed, as if she were the one being inconvenienced. One of our board members must have parked there. We'll get to it when we get to it. Logan took a slow breath. No, you'll get to it now. You're being dramatic, she replied, exasperated. Maybe you should go tend to your crops. Isn't that what you do all day? That was all Logan needed to hear. He hung up. The authorities were no help. Zoning gray areas, mediation processes, filing complaints. Useless. The HOA had connections. Nobody wanted to make trouble for them. But Logan? He was done waiting. By noon, he was behind the wheel of his front loader, rumbling toward the giant compost heap at the back of his property. It had been building for months, a steaming, ripe pile of manure just waiting for a purpose. He found one. Scooping up a massive load with the loader's bucket, Logan drove back to where the two Escalades gleamed obnoxiously in the sunlight. And he dumped it. A tidal wave of manure splattered across the SUVs, covering the windows, clogging the air vents, and cascading over the roofs like a brown waterfall. Logan chuckled darkly and got another load. Then another, until both vehicles were buried up to their door handles in the thick, steaming pile. He planted a wooden sign right on top of the heap, painted in big, bold letters. Next time, ask for permission. And he went back to work. An hour later, the screaming started. Melissa Hawthorne and her board members arrived to find their luxury vehicles buried under half a ton of cow manure. Melissa, dressed in a pristine white pantsuit, nearly collapsed into the dirt as she shrieked in outrage. Logan strolled out of his barn, wiping his hands on a rag. You did this, Melissa screeched. Logan tilted his head. Did what? You buried our vehicles in, she gagged, waving frantically at the reeking pile. Looks like someone parked in the wrong spot, Logan said evenly. Farm waste management, you know. We're calling the police, one board member shouted. Go ahead, Logan replied. I got the whole conversation recorded. You admitted to trespassing. Melissa's mouth opened, then shut. One of her board members muttered, he's got a point. Logan pointed up. A drone hovered in the sky, capturing everything. And it looks like the news is already picking up the story. Within hours, the footage was viral. Farmer fights back against HOA bullies, read the headlines. People cheered Logan in the comments. Serves him right, they said. Finally, someone stood up to those HOA tyrants. By nightfall, Melissa Hawthorne was public enemy number one. HOA members revolted. Homeowners told their own stories. Complaints flooded the city council. And the mayor? He announced an investigation. Melissa stepped down days later. 2 weeks passed. Logan received a letter offering $22,000 in damages from the HOA. He laughed, pocketed the check, and threw a massive neighborhood barbecue with the payout. But Melissa Hawthorne wasn't done. One evening, Logan saw her old sedan parked near his property's edge. Not on his land, but close. Then the sirens came. 2 patrol cars boxed her in. She'd filed harassment charges against Logan, but the cops had already uncovered her fraudulent HOA paperwork and illegal overreach. Logan watched as they cuffed her. Sorry for the trouble, Mr. Carter, an officer said. Logan tipped his hat. Appreciate it, officer. At the barbecue the following weekend, Logan raised his beer. To good neighbors, bad HOAs, and standing your ground. The crowd cheered, and Logan smiled. No HOA would ever mess with him again.